Are you able to view my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. What we have discussed in last lecture? Can anyone? Pratik वाळुंजकर
Yes, sir.
सांगा. कालच्या
Uh,
लेक्चरला होता.
ha.
सांग मग.
In VHDL program,
हम्म.
three function is there.
3 parts are there, right?
Uh,
Which are those?
entity,
Hmm.
uh,
Entity is correct. Second one, Rohit Hazare. रोहित हजारे आहे का?
entity library आणि architecture.
Correct. Entity, library and architecture. Correct. Okay. Then in entity part, what we supposed to write there, or what do you mean by entity of code? Pradeep Kamble. Pradeep Kamble is there. काळे शिवराज
येस सर.
कुठं होता 2 दिवस राजा?
सर काल नव्हतो, फक्त परवा होतो सर.
बर, काल कुठं होता?
सर जरा मेडिकल प्रॉब्लेम होता म्हणून जरा गेलो होतो.
बर, ठीक आहे. परवाच्या लेक्चरला काय काय शिकला सांग.
लक्षात नाही सर.
लक्षात नाही? बर, आज वाच, उद्या तुला विचारणार मी सगळं.
हो सर, ठीक आहे.
सुजय सुजय गटे. हे कोण आहे? सुजित नंदवते. पहिलंच लेक्चर दिसते आजचं. हुई सुजित नंदवते. आपल्या डिव्हिजन मध्ये आहे सुजित नंदवते कोण? श्लोक पाटील.
यस सर, बोला.
काय बोलू, तूच बोल. कुठं होता 2 दिवस?
काल नव्हतं सर, परवा होता.
काल नव्हता, परवा होता. काल कुठं होता?
होतो.
हा?
घरीच होतो कुठे नव्हतं.
लेक्चरला का नव्हता ते विचारतोय रे मी. उगीच
काय सर?
लेक्चरला का नव्हता ते विचारतोय मी.
झोपलो होतो सर, आजारी होतो.
झोपला होता, आजारी होता.
हो.
बर, ठीक. काय कळलं या सब्जेक्ट मधलं? पहिल्या लेक्चरला होतास ना कालच्या परवा दिवशी?
हो होतं की.
हा, सांगा काय कळलं.
पहिल्या लेक्चरला इंट्रोडक्शन दिलं सर तुम्ही, VHDL EDA टूल्स बद्दल.
हम्म
VHDL ची हिस्ट्री सांगितली, VHDL काय आहे, कुठे लागतं,
हम्म
आणि EDA टूल्स जस्ट स्टार्ट केलं होतं आणि काल नव्हतं.
एचडीएल बद्दल पण सांगितलं ना. 2 टाइप्स ऑफ एचडीएल कुठले सांग.
व्हेरिलॉग आणि हार्डवेअर डिस्क्रिप्शन लँग्वेज.
हो, तेच एचडीएल चे 2 टाइप कुठले? हार्डवेअर डिस्क्रिप्शन लँग्वेज, फर्स्ट टाइप इज व्हेरिलॉग अँड सेकंड लँग्वेज इज आता काय शिकतोय आपण?
काल नव्हतं सर, आजचं कसं काय माहिती मला.
आपल्या ह्याचं युनिटचं नाव काय आहे?
इंट्रोडक्शन टू EDA टूल अँड VHDL प्रोग्रामिंग.
एक्झॅक्टली. त्यातलं सेकंड पार्ट व्हीएचडीएल प्रोग्रामिंग इज टाइप ऑफ
VHDL प्रोग्रामिंग.
एचडीएल चे 2 टाइप, व्हेरिलॉग आणि व्हीएचडीएल. कळलं का? त्यातला
Yes.
आता आपण व्हीएचडीएल शिकतोय, म्हणजे कालच
Okay.
सुरुवात केली.
Okay sir.
Okay. So now yesterday we have discussed the basic structure of VHDL code, right? Any VHDL code you take, it has some basic structure. It has 3 parts. First is a libraries, second one entities, and third architecture. So we have studied what do you mean by library. In library, which library we supposed to introduce, or we supposed to write. In entity, we supposed to identify the input output ports of the your program or design, that we have to specify in the entity part, and remaining is architecture. In architecture part, you supposed to write your logic, your coding logic. And yesterday we also discussed one example also, that is a full adder, right? So for full adder, how many inputs and how many outputs we supposed to take? 3 inputs, that is A, B, that means 2 number. Third one is a carry in. So these are the 3 inputs, and at the output you will require one for sum, another for C out, that is carry out. So in all, 3 inputs and 2 outputs we require for the full adder circuit. So these 3 inputs and 4 outputs are called as entity, or in entity part we have to declare these inputs and outputs that we are going to use. So this is about entity. In architecture, what we have written? Actual the logic, right? We have studied the full adder circuit. We have also derived this k equations, k map equations, right? And now the in architecture part, actually after begin, we supposed to write that Boolean equations or anything you can write. There are different types of modeling. It is not necessary you always write some Boolean equation also. No, you can use conditional statements also, if else, right? Yesterday also we have discussed this example regarding I guess 4:1 multiplexer, right? So in architecture, you as per your convenience, you can code your entire logic, right? So this is what we have discussed in yesterday's lecture. So I hope you have clear with this. Now we will start our today's lecture. with the in detail of the basic structures in VHDL. Right. This part we have already started yesterday. Now we will discuss each and every part in detail. Okay. Now again, this slide that you are able to see indicates the same. VHDL type or VHDL code has basic three types: entity, architecture, and library. Again, the package and configuration is a part of entity only, right? Packages and configuration you can consider it as a entity only, but for a sake of your understanding, I have considered them different. So now you can also say any VHDL code have entity. In entity there is a packages and configurations. This is the first part. Then uh, sorry, library you can take as a part of packages and configurations. In package or configuration is a sub part of library. In a library there are packages. In a packages there are different configurations. Means what? Packages configurations comes under the library part. Entity is a different, or entity is an individual part. Architecture is a individual part. But packages configuration can be added into a library part only. So don't get confused. Sir, here we are getting the 5 parts. Yesterday you told 3 only. It is also okay. This also correct. Okay, because this package and configuration can be counted under library section. Library has packages and configurations. Clear with this? Okay. Now again we will discuss the each and every part. That means what do you mean by entity, what do you mean by architecture, what do you mean by library, in that packages what it means, configuration means what, that we are going to discuss in detail. Okay, now we will start our discussion with the basic structure in VHDL, and that is the first and very important part is entity declaration and architecture bodies. Now already we have discussed entity means what are the inputs and output ports or connections that you are required to design your circuit. That is mean by entity declaration. Means in entity declaration you have to decide how many inputs and how many outputs you will require in your design. Simple. That is what entity declaration, right? So this slide explains the same thing. Again, now as I told you, this VHDL language has its own syntax. Okay, we have clear with the entity. Entity means what? Declaration of the input and outputs. But how to declare that, right? The next question is how to declare that. It must have its own syntax. बरोबर आहे का नाही? की जसं फॉर एक्झाम्पल सी लँग्वेज मध्ये प्रिंट एफ हे स्टेटमेंट आउटपुट देतं, पण प्रिंट एफ हॅज इट्स ओन सिंटॅक्स. फॉर एक्झाम्पल एखादा तुम्हाला वर्ड हॅलो तुम्हाला प्रिंट करायचा आहे, तर प्रिंट एफ इन राऊंड ब्रॅकेट हॅलो असं लिहिलं तर ते प्रिंट होईल काय हो? If I have written printf statement and in round brackets simply I have written hello world, will it get printed at the output?
No.
No.
No. Why?
Double inverted comma.
Exactly. That hello word must be specified into that double inverted comma. Means what? It is a fixed syntax of that statement. त्या स्टेटमेंटचं एक स्ट्रक्चर आहे की नुसतं प्रिंटेफ लिहून तुम्ही स्क्वेअर ब्रॅकेट मध्ये एखादा शब्द लिहिला तर तो काय प्रिंट लगे होणार नाहीये का? तुम्ही त्याचा सिंटॅक्स नाही फॉलो केला. त्याचा सिंटॅक्स काय? प्रिंटेफ in round bracket double inverted comma, and in that you can put your a variable or word that you want to be printed at the output. Then and then only it will get printed. Similarly, in VHDL language, everything has its own syntax. कुठलीही लँग्वेज असू दे त्याला प्रत्येक आपला एक सिंटॅक्स असतो, राईट? अँड दॅट इज व्हॉट वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस इन धिस युनिट, एंटायर युनिट. द डिफरंट सिंटॅक्स ऑफ ईच अँड एव्हरी पार्ट ऑफ VHDL लँग्वेज. एंटिटी कशी डिक्लेअर करणार, देन पॅकेजेस कसे डिक्लेअर करणार, आर्किटेक्चर मध्ये व्हॉट डिफरंट टाइप्स ऑफ प्रोग्रामिंग टेक्निक्स और मॉडेल्स यू कॅन यूज, राईट? व्हाय इट इज नेसेसरी टू पुट semi-comma after every statement, that I already discussed yesterday, because that indicates the end of the declaration or end of the statement. So it is very necessary to mention the सेमिकॉलन आफ्टर एव्हरी स्टेटमेंट, राईट. मग तसं जसं प्रत्येक लँग्वेजला एक त्याचा सिंटॅक्स आहे, सिमिलरली VHDL also has its own syntax, and that is what we are going to study in this lecture. So you can see on the screen there is a syntax given for the declaration of entity. म्हणजे जे एंटिटी आहे ती कशी डिक्लेअर करणार त्यासाठीचा हा सिंटॅक्स दिलेला आहे. फर्स्ट यू हॅव टू राईट एंटिटी वर्ड, देन एंटिटी नेम. आता एंटिटी म्हणजे काय की इनपुट आउटपुट, पण ते इनपुट आउटपुट कशाचे डिक्लेअर करताय तुम्ही, दॅट इज एंटिटी नेम. इनपुट आउटपुट मल्टिप्लेक्सरचे आहेत का, फुल ॲडरचे आहेत का, हाफ ॲडरचे आहेत का, अजून दुसऱ्या कुठल्या सर्किटचे, ते कळायला नको का. दॅट्स वाय एंटिटी नेम इज रिक्वायर्ड. एंटिटी, नाउ हियर एंटिटी नेम मीन्स व्हॉट, यू कॅन राईट D_FF or D flip flop, or if you are working on a multiplexer, you can write mux_41, that means 4:1 multiplexer. Again, in case of full adder, you can write full_ADD, or there is no mention to even what we can say, write the underscore. That is the entity name. You can write anything there. You can write your own name, no problem. You can write your own name as an entity name, because this is not a case sensitive language. म्हणजे एंटिटी नेम तुम्ही काही देऊ शकता, बट फॉर द सेक ऑफ कन्व्हिनियन्स अँड द सेक ऑफ मॅटर, व्हॉट एव्हर द डिझाईन वी आर डिझायनिंग, वी हॅपन टू गिव्ह द सेम नेम. आपण फुल ॲडर करतोय तर यू कॅन सिम्पली राईट एंटिटी फुल ॲडर इज, सिम्पल, दॅट्स ऑल. द एंटिटी यू हॅव डिक्लेअर, राईट. देन in next you have to declare the port declaration or generic declaration. Port declaration means what? Now we have given the name of the entity. आपण आता डिक्लेअर केलं की आपण आता फुल ॲडरचं इनपुट आउटपुट डिस्क्रिप्शन करत आहोत. दिस इज व्हॉट द एंटिटी नेम वी हॅव डिक्लेअर्ड. मग आता ते इनपुट आउटपुट किती लागणार हे पण लिहावे लागणार आपल्याला. 3 इनपुट आणि 2 आउटपुट. दॅट part comes under the port declaration. That means what? We will require 3 ports for the input and 2 ports for the output. This entire part forms the entity of your code, right? Means what? For example, for full adder, how you will write? Entity full adder is A, B, C in is input ports. Sum and carry out is equal to output ports, right? Again, we will discuss the same thing with example also, but this is what the syntax of entity declaration. You have to declare entity using this same syntax. Are you getting? समजतंय का? Okay. Now, when to use square bracket, when to use a single line or a vertical line, and when to use curly bracket, it is mentioned. Square bracket denotes the optional parameters, right? Means what? In entity and in generic declaration, anything you write with square bracket, that will be considered as an optional parameter. Anything you write or anything you will integrate with this vertical bar, that will be a choice amongst alternatives. That means what? Either this or that or that. There should be choices. If there are more than one choice, you can simply distinguish that choices with this vertical bar that indicates this or this or this or this. For example, suppose if you want to print the 7 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you can separate all this day with this vertical bar. That means any of the 7 days, any one of the day mentioned in or day separated by the vertical line. And last, the curly bracket, that indicates one or more items can be made. Whatever the declaration you made and the curly bracket, that indicates you can declared one or more choices amongst the many. So this is all about the entity part. Now, generic declaration. Now, what do you mean by generic declaration? It declares the constants that can be used to control the structure or behavior of the entity. Means what? Now, similarly, you did this already In C language also, you happen to declare some universal constant. In case of VHDL also, if you happen to declare some constants that can be used many times, that comes under the generic declaration. Means what? In entity declaration, you can simply declare the input output ports. But if you happen to declare some constants and that can be used in the architecture part, so you can declare that constant using the generic declaration statement. You can use that part using generic declaration statement, right? So this is the syntax for the generic declaration. This is the syntax for the generic declaration. Clear? All of
Yes,
you
sir.
clear with this? Okay, CR, I want to ask you one thing. बाकीचे फॅकल्टी तुम्हाला नोट्स वगैरे लिहून घ्यायला लावतात का? जस्ट दे आर एक्सप्लेनिंग.
नोट्स देतात सर, म्हणजे पीपीटी चालू असताना लिहू देतात.
अच्छा, लिहू देतात ते.
हा सर.
Okay, then we will follow the same practice also. Okay, now you copy this first slide. झालं की मला ओव्हर म्हणून सांगायचं. Then I will change the next slide.
ओके सर.
सर आवाज येत नाहीये.
Over.
Sir, no sir.
Simply write this entity part, which I am showing using the cursor. Put the heading entity declaration. Okay, then put the heading this, copy these 3 lines, definition of entity declaration, and write up to this part. Finished?
No sir.
Do it fast. We have to cover 107 slides. This is the most important chapter, and this chapter has more weightage in section first. Now, can I put the assignment questions onto your group so that you can start solving? And even MCQ is also ready with me. No problem. Today you will get the assignment questions and MCQ questions of this subject.
सर असाइनमेंट क्वेश्चन कशात सॉल्व करायचे?
No, I know you haven't got material to solve that, but just for a sake of your understanding, at least you can what we can say, find the answers by using Google, right? Which type of questions will appear in the exam? At least you must have familiar with the question type and patterns and marks, right? That's why I will share with you. Once you will resume into a college, once you will get that material stationery, you start solving that.
ओके सर.
But MCQ you need to prepare. Why? Because after completion of this unit, I will conduct test of 15 or 20 marks MCQ test. There will be MCQ test, no description, but you have to prepare for that. Based on
Okay, sir.
based on this unit, using Google Form, I will conduct the 20 marks test, kind of MCQ test.
झालं सर.
Okay, fine. Now copy this slide, put the heading generic declaration and write up to this part only. Means generic declaration is used to declare the constants, and that can be used to control the structure and behavior of the entity. Means what are the constants you want to declare? You can declare that using generic statement. Do it fast, guys, please. We have to cover many slides. Finished?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now we will discuss the next part, that is port declaration, right? Now, I have already told you. What do you mean by port declaration? How many input pins or terminals and how many output terminals you will require to design your circuit, that ports you have to declare under the port declaration part. And what is syntax for the same? You have to write the port, right? Then port name, its mode. Means what? Mode means what? Whether it is input, whether it is output, or whether it is bidirectional. Port name means what? You have given the name to that port. For example, in case of full adder, we have given A, B and C in. So in this case, how we can declare that port? Port, round bracket, port name will be A, comma B, comma C in, then colon, port type. All are the input. So mode will be the input, then followed by initial value. So here we don't have any initial value, right? We are taking that is from the user. So initial value will not be there. So simply we can have the mode and its type. Type means what? Whether it is integer, whether it is bit vector, or whether it is simply a bit, right? These data types we are going to discuss later. बरोबर आहे. म्हणजे ते जे तुम्ही ए बी सी इन डिक्लेअर केलेलं आहे, इनपुट पोर्ट आहे, पण ते ए बी सी इंटिजर्स आहेत का व्हेक्टर्स टाइप्स आहेत का बिट टाइप आहेत, हे पण तुम्हाला लिहावं लागतं, राईट? दॅट डेटा टाइप वी विल डिस्कस लेटर ऑन. सो दिस इज अबाउट द पोर्ट डिक्लेरेशन. ओके, राईट अप टू दिस पॉइंट ओनली. पोर्ट डिक्लेरेशन अँड इट्स सिंटॅक्स, दॅट्स ऑल. See, in this line, I have clearly mentioned port names. That means the whatever the names you can use, and it is not necessary that you can use A, B, C. You have 26 letters. You can use anything. You can write M, and you can write Z. You can write X, Y. You can write P, Q. Anything. You have 26 alphabet. You can write anything. Mode means its direction, whether it is input, whether it is output, or whether it is input output. That means bidirectional. and type means which data types that port is, whether it is integer, whether it is bit, or whether it is bit vector type. So that you have to specify in this type. And initial value means if suppose that particular pin you have to assign with some initial value, you can assign. But in case in our example, in case of full adder, we don't have initial value because we are taking the inputs from the user. So need not to mention the initial value. And this, the last statement at the bottom is very, very, very important. VHDL is not case sensitive language. Yesterday I have explained this. There is no what we can say a restriction of the capital letters and small letters. See, in this first case, all we have used all small letters. Then we have made Y as a capital. Then in third case, we have used all capital letters. But this all three have same meaning. Means what? First you have declared small x. Now next you have made that capital X. Doesn't make, because it is not case sensitive language. These three are the one and same. So VHDL is not case sensitive language. कॅपिटलच पाहिजे लिटर स्मॉलच पाहिजे काय नाही. तुम्ही आधी स्मॉल डिक्लेअर केलं मग चुकून कॅपिटल लिहिलं, डझंट मॅटर. इट इज नॉट केस सेन्सिटिव्ह लँग्वेज. तरी तुमचा कोड रन होणार, तुम्हाला तुमचं आउटपुट मिळणार. फिनिश. Now the same third slide I have explained. Port modes can be of in, out, and in out. That means bidirectional. In means what? It can only be read. Means it can take the inputs from the user. Out means what? It can only be assigned value, or it can be used for output only. That means it can give the value to the user. It will simply output the result. And in out means what? It can also be take the input and can also produce the output, bidirectional, right? And buffer means what? It can be read and assigned value, but it can have only one driver. That means can be both on the right and left side of the assignment. Means it have only one driver, and buffer is also kind of bidirectional port, or you can say in out port. So copy this meaning of these three only. In means input or read. Out means output only. And in out means can be read and can be produced output, or can be assigned values. So write this slide also. In, out, and in out. Finish?
सर
Hmm.
तुम्ही शिकवा सर, आम्ही स्क्रीनशॉट काढून परत लिहितो.
Okay, fine. No problem. Now, this is the example of port declaration. So here I have mentioned the name entity, right? Then port type A, B, C, D. So here A is an entity name, in is a mode, and this is integer. It is a data type. So A is a port name, then semicolon. In means we have specified the mode, whether it is input or output, and then it's a data type, whether it is integer, bit vector, or maybe single bit. That is there are different data types in VHDL that we are going to discuss later. So this is about the entity declaration. Then here comes the architecture part, right? So in architecture, after begin statement, you have to execute or you have to write actual your coding part in this section. In this section, you have to write the coding part. So this, how to write this, that we are going to discuss later. So this is about the port declaration. Now, this is the entity declaration. The same example we have discussed yesterday only. For full adder, how you can write entity, then entity name. Here we have given full underscore adder. So this is entity name. Is, then port, in square bracket, port name is. So A, comma B, comma C in. These are the port names. Semicolon. In is a mode and bit is a data type. That means A, B, C are the input ports and that is of data type. That is of data type. Clear? Similarly, sum and count. That means sum and C out, carry out. These are the output. This is mode and its data type is bit. And sum and count are the port names. This is how the total entity you can declare. And this is the syntax of declaring entity. As here we are not using any constant, so we haven't mentioned the generic statement. If we are using the constant, then again after port, we have to write the generic and then the same syntax of the generic. That means to declare the constant. But for full adder, we don't require any constant. And even we have not mentioned any initial value also, because this A, B, C in we are taking from the user. So there is no any predefined value. That's why we haven't mentioned any initial value also. If you want to stick with some initial value, yes, of course, you can mention here. As per in the syntax. In syntax, there is one section, initial value, right? You can declare here also. But as we are not using any initial value, we are taking the input from the user, we are not declaring any initial value here. Clear with this? So this is about the entity declaration part. How to declare, what are the syntax? See, here again, there is one more example. Here we have used the generic statement. Are you able to see this generic statement? In generic statement, we have declared this constant value. That means n is of integer type and its value is 4. That means n is a constant with value 4. Similarly, m is a time, right? And semicolon equal to means you have to assign initial value. Here for constants, we have assigned this initial value. Because it is a constant, we have to make that fixed value. So we have declared the initial value. And this is a constant. That means generic n is a constant of type integer and its value is 4. Similarly, m is a time and its value is 10 nanoseconds. This is we have assigned the initial value. And of course, as we have declared in the generic part, so we have to consider this n and m as a constant, right? Next, port. Again, we have declared here port A, B. Now mode is input. Now here we have used the data type is bit vector. Why this required bit vector data type? Because if suppose A is a 4-bit, consider A is a 4-bit, 1101. How you can declare that 4-bit? For that purpose, you have to declare this bit vector data type, or you have to use this bit vector data type. And here you have to mention the n minus 1 down to 0. Our n is 4-bit. So 4 minus 1 is 3. 3 down to 0. That means there is 4 bits. 0, 1, 2, 3. 4 bits. Means what? If you have to declare a single bit, either 0 or 1. So simply you can write this type, bit. A single bit. If you want to declare more than 1 bit, you have to go for this bit underscore vector data type. म्हणजे एकच बिट डिक्लेअर करायचं असतं 0 किंवा 1, तेव्हा फक्त बिट वापरायचं. दॅट इंडिकेट्स इट्स अ सिंगल बिट. अँड इफ यू वॉन्ट टू डिक्लेअर मोर दॅन 1 बिट, you have to go for this bit vector data type. You have to go for this bit vector data type. If you want to declare integer, you can use integer also. Likewise, as we have used this in generic declaration, right? Because 4 is an integer, so we are declaring the integer part. That's why we have written here integer. Integer also one data type, Bit vector is also one data type, and bit also is one data type. So this is more about the entity declaration. All of you have clear with the entity declaration part? In how many ways we can declare the entity?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Now see here we have discussed the 4 bit A0, A1, A2, A3. मग आता इथं तुम्ही बिट वापरणार का बिट व्हेक्टर वापरणार सांगा बरं. बिट कधी वापरतात एक बिट डिक्लेअर करायचा असेल तर राईट. अँड बिट व्हेक्टर इज इफ देर आर इफ युअर इनपुट इज मोर दॅन वन बिट. सो हिअर A0, A1, A2, A3 we are using the 4 bit input. So we have to use bit underscore vector in bracket 3 down to 0. N minus 1 down to 0. N is of 4 bit. So 3 down to 0. This is how you can declare either a single bit or even you can declare more than one bit input in a entity part. Clear with this? समजलंय का?
येस सर.
Okay. Now in next lecture, we will start with the next part of VHDL code, that is architecture. In today's lecture, we have discussed the different syntax and different data types, different modes of entity declaration. Entity कशी डिक्लेअर करणार तुम्ही कुठल्याही डिजिटल डिझाईनची, that we have studied in today's lecture. Right? Whether it is in or out, mode त्याचा लिहावा लागतो, इनपुट आहे का आउटपुट आहे, then its data type. If you want to assign initial value, then you can assign initial value, or if you don't have, simply leave it. So this is all about entity declaration, the syntax for entity declaration. If you want to declare some constant, you have to use the generic declaration. So we have studied the complete part of entity declaration. Clear?
येस सर.
Okay, fine. Now in tomorrow's lecture, we will start with the next part, that is architecture and its different types of modeling, behavioral, data flow and structural style. Now what is difference between these three, how to write a program using each style, that we are going to discuss in next lecture, that means tomorrow's lecture. Okay. Now roll number 1 to 10, put your roll calls into a chat box.